RevOpsAF, the only podcast for people who are RevOpsAF and want to learn all about things that are RevOps AF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS, for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers.
Hello, everybody. I'm Matthew Volm, co-host of the RevOps AF podcast, where we talk to people who are RevOps AF about things who are RevOps AF. And today I am with Ryan Milligan, who is the VP of Revenue Operations over at QuotaPath. And we are going to be talking all about unconventional planning and some considerations outside of the typical maybe software SaaS industries, and then also what you should think about when it comes to compensation outside of sales and other departments. So Ryan, thank you for joining us, my friend. And maybe one of the first things we can get into here a little bit is, why is compensation planning so important for organizations today? And folks that are listening in are going to be at different stages of maturity within companies, right? Some very early stage, some mid-market, some enterprise. And when should people really start thinking about comp planning for their businesses? And is it ever really too early to start comp planning?
Yeah, first off, thank you so much for having me. I love these conversations and love being with the RevOps Comp team. So thank you for the invite. You asked a couple questions there, so I'll start thinking through some pieces of it.
Yeah.
The first question was around why is comp planning so important and what are you trying to do? And ultimately our thesis as a business, right? So QuotaPath helps you not only automate the process of calculating and paying commissions, but truly helps you use your comp plan as a tool to drive the right outcomes from your team. So a lot of times historically, a comp plan is a byproduct. It is a calculation that's done in a silo in Excel by a finance team that's not really motivating people to deliver an outcome in real time, which creates mistrust, errors in calculations, and it's just this I have to have a comp plan because I told these people I can pay them on a comp plan. We feel like a comp plan is the best tool in your toolkit to drive humans to deliver revenue that's great for your business, whether that's longer term committed revenue, whether that's revenue within a certain vertical, whether that's revenue that's bundled a couple products, right? And so for us, why is a comp plan so important? It is the best way to get people to do what you want them to do for the betterment of their wallet and thus the betterment of your business. And in terms of when we think about planning, cop-out answer, never too soon. We typically consider September, October, we call it Comptober over here at QuotaPath. That start of Q4 is a really good time to start thinking about, okay, I have enough data from the first half of the year to assess, did the comp plan drive the humans to do what I wanted them to do? And then how do I spend some time with stakeholders, either keeping that in place or making some changes based on what the team tells me?
Yeah, makes sense. And yeah, I think, like you said, we often think about comp plan as call it an output or a byproduct, right? Like, for example, we have a sales team. They need a variable compensation package. Let's create a comp plan instead of the other way around, which is, how can we create a comp plan for, say, our sales team that will motivate them and incentivize them to do what's best for them, their wallet, and then the business, right? And if you just reframe things like that, the outcomes that you can drive are actually drastically different. So we all think of compensation, and even in our space, right, I guess heavily on like B2B software technology, right? Like you're hiring these kind of sales reps. They're going out and selling software. Your sales team has a base salary. They have some variable compensation package that's based on basically the amount of dollars that they sell. That's call it the traditional or typical kind of mindset that most folks probably think about when it comes to compensation and compensation planning. But as we all know, outside of sales, there's a lot of other people that have variable compensation and that you can use variable comp to motivate. And then, believe it or not, there's all these other businesses outside of software and technology, right, that also exist. So I guess maybe let's start there. What are some of the kind of spaces outside of B2B software and technology industries that have complex kind of compensation models, structures in place? And then let's dive into, after that, some of the different teams outside of sales that we traditionally think about when it comes to comp plans.
Yeah, so starting with the industries, the nice part about commissions and compensation is that any team that has people selling a product has a compensation plan. We tend to be a bit myopically focused on B2B software, just with the proverbial we, right? But you think about car dealerships, roofing and solar businesses, door-to-door sales, pest control. You think about medical device sales, any sort of thing in which you're selling a good or service, you likely have some sort of variable compensation tied to it. And I think what B2B software can learn from those non-traditional, let's call it, software adopting businesses is they do a really good job at tying the delivery of the thing to the compensation, right? So we work with a number of roofing businesses, for example, and that's a great example of where certain types of deals or certain types of customers, they will take the profit margin of that project and compensate the team member on the profit margin of that contract. And then if they also have a seller who sells multiple deals on one street or in one area to get that kind of buzz for their business, they'll accelerate their rates. Roofing, as an example, is super clear about, okay, hey, look, I really care about two things. I care about profit. So like I'm going to comp on profit, not on revenue, because jobs have different profitability outcomes. And I really care about like guerrilla style marketing, street-based awareness. So if you sell multiple jobs on the same street, it's more efficient for cost for the business and good for brand. And so how you apply that into a B2B software lens is that what is the one sentence for what you want these people to do and what separates good from great? You're selling software, you're probably going to comp an AE, let's say, on closed-won revenue. But what is great closed-won revenue? Is that revenue within a certain industry? Is that revenue that bundles a couple of different types of products that you have together to improve your net revenue retention down the line? So what you want to say is the end output is revenue expansion for your business. You look at, okay, what are your great customers look like? And how do you move more and more up the funnel to drive people to sell those types of great customers? And that's how I tend to think about things there.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it makes a lot of sense too. And so let's go. So we talked about things that called software can learn from maybe non-software industries when it comes to how you're comping and incentivizing, say, your sales team. Let's flip that now to say, okay, we know all these things, right? And we think about compensation and compensation planning typically for our sales team, right? Like we're talking about. How can we apply, called the same framework, the same best practices, all that we know about comping sales team members to folks and teams outside of sales? Like what are some of those maybe atypical or maybe not like first line of thinking teams that we can maybe should be compensating with some sort of incentive comp planning? Tell us more about that.
Totally. So easy first answer, every employee at QuotaPath is on a variable comp plan. So from an engineer to a member of our HR team, to a product manager, to sellers, to marketing, everybody's on a variable comp plan. The question that you want to ask when you're developing a variable comp plan, maybe for a marketing team or a product team, is what is the end outcome you're trying to drive? And what is the key metric you need to move for your business this year or going into 2025? So maybe it all starts with your financial plan. So let's say that you're an SMB business and you're trying to push yourself more you're selling into the SMB and you're trying to push yourself more into the mid-market, and your path to grow from a $3 million ARR business to a $10 million ARR business next year is in tripling your ASP, like upping your win rates in the mid-market and growing your ASP. So what you have to do is start to close more bigger deals. That's like what you've told your investors and your board.
Yeah.
So then how do you take that and move that outcome into what individual team members can control? So maybe a product manager and a product team is the way that they're going to contribute is they're going to release a set of new features that allow you to drive up your win rate in the mid-market. So we, as QuotaPath, for example, released multi-level of being able to approve commissions across multiple people, as great mid-market teams tend to have that problem. Yeah. So then you could maybe think about, okay, do you have an adoption target for that feature? Or do you have a timeline target? Or do you have something that the product manager and the product management team can control, that they have high scope of control over themselves, that correlates with your expectation to improve your ASP, let's say. So the things you really want to figure out is, what's the big metric we're trying to move? How do each of these teams contribute to that metric? And then designing a comp plan that is specifically within that person's scope of control. That's not, I don't like MBOs. Like, you don't want to be these binary, like these like vague, decided, did they do a good job at their job? That's in their base salary. This is, how do they go above and beyond to solve these problems?
Yeah. It's a good, so one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking there was timing, time frame, and how to strike the balance between the aligning the time frame required for some of these things to not being so short that either you're just in this like constant cycle of just planning, comping, not really being able to do a whole lot and turning that around really quickly, but then also not doing it too long. So not being like, oh, this thing that maybe is going to take, I don't know, 3 months or 6 months to do, I'm not going to be judged on or comped on till 12 months down the road. So how should people think about best practices on timing for that? And is there any call it general rule? Is it like, oh, hey, like 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? Is it aligned to some other metric? But like, how does timing fit into this whole thing?
So I tend to think about you having your team members on annual plans, right? They're at the beginning of the year, you're rolling out an annual plan. And each quarter, you're deciding with them what is the base component of their variable compensation for teams that are not as revenue immediately tied.
Yeah.
So your sales team's going to have a quarterly quota, your account management team's going to have a quarterly quota, your marketing team's going to have a pipeline gen target quarterly. I'm talking more about like your product team, your engineering team. And I think what you're looking to do in those quarters is have a backstop be your North Star metric. So whatever major metric for your business and the business as a whole, if you don't have an initiative you can tie directly to it, you have an ending target of a North Star metric like gross revenue retention or active usage or something like that. And then in the quarters in which you have more of these milestone deliveries, where you have a measurement period after, hey, we're releasing a new feature in 3 months, what percentage of our customers are using that feature, for example, that allows you to then time out, okay, which quarters are you going to use to comp on your core underlying metric of your business? And then which of your quarters are you going to use to comp on a feature release adoption or something that's moving the needle on the key metric you need to move?
Yeah. And let's say it's quarterly that we're doing this. Is it typically one thing you're judging folks on? Is that the best? Is it 2, 3? Is it 10? What's the right number there?
For these types of roles that tend to be not often in the conversation of variable compensation, I tend to do one big thing. And I tend to, the other thing to remember is a percentage of their take-home pay for this one thing is going to be much lower because it's a scope of control question, right? So we're talking an average seller, maybe you're paying them 50-50 base variable.
Yeah.
A PM or a finance manager, maybe it's 90-10, maybe it's 85-15. It's something that makes a difference for them, but is not as much as in the scope of control of constantly closing deals, for example. And it becomes a really cool rallying cry, right? So if you have product and engineering and finance potentially all working on the successful rollout and adoption of this new feature, variably comp them on how good a job they did at driving the rollout of that feature, and then tie them in a cash way to driving an improvement in an outcome for your business. Like, that's the whole point. It's like driving these people to deliver an outcome that's great for your business. And then, hey, guess what? It's great for your wallet too.
Yeah. And so you said, think of things on a annual basis. It sounds like maybe the range of base versus variable for some of these roles outside of sales, again, just a rough benchmark, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10 to 20% variable,
Yep.
80 to 90% base. And then let's say you're doing these things on a quarterly basis. Is it typically then best practice? Obviously, you said take one thing, measure it for that particular quarter, and then pay them out on a quarterly basis as
Yep.
well? Or
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so let's say, an example would be you're trying to drive adoption of a new feature that you released at the end of the year this year, throughout the course of next year. And your hypothesis is, hey, if we can get 30% of our customers using this feature, that's going to lead to higher ASP upon renewal because we can upsell it. Just off the cuff example, right? Then you could set milestones throughout the year, which is, hey, if by the end of Q1, 15% of customers are using this feature, you'll get your kind of like milestone bonus at the end of the quarter. If by the end of Q2, it's 20%. If by the end of Q3, it's 25 and then 30. You're like working to drive, you're improving the feature over time. You're co-marketing and cross-selling it with the team. You're working to drive adoption, so on and so forth. And so it's really, what is that end metric we're trying to move? And how are all these people individually responsible for that outcome?
Yeah. And so we talked a little bit about, you mentioned like product and engineering, right? Being tied to, let's say it's like some new features that would allow you to move up market, right? That you might be working on for that particular quarter. What are some other teams? Maybe some other examples of some ideas for comp planning, right? Whether it's like marketing, CS, that you've seen either like customers do that you've done at QuotaPath. Like what are some of those examples that you can provide there?
On the revenue side of the business, I run marketing BDR all the way through CS account management is how I tend to think about things. And so on the marketing side of the house, you're talking about pipeline generation, and you're specifically talking about ideally ICP pipeline generation to say, hey, you have a target for pipe gen, but we'll accelerate your rate if that pipe is ideal customer, because at the end of the day, we're always thinking about net revenue retention at the end of the funnel. So you're thinking about ICP pipeline generation for marketing and then also for your BR team. And then as you move through the funnel, we've talked a lot about sales comp, but then you get into CS and account management, depending if the teams are split or together. You're thinking about comping on successful implementations. You're thinking about comping on product adoption and how people are using the product early on in their life cycle. And then you're always comping on net revenue retention, be it GRR or expansion. The thing I will push on, though, is on the CS and AM side of the house. If you have net revenue retention as your target and you don't account for successful adoption initially of the product, you're just going to have people constantly in this vicious cycle where they're not understanding why their net revenue retention isn't improving. And it's because they're not spending enough of their time getting people up and running early. So you do want a component of your variable comp to be, are we actually driving these people to adopt and use the product effectively?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I'm curious. So we talked a little bit about industries outside of B2B software. We talked a little bit about teams outside of sales. If you can think to either a customer or customers that you've seen at QuotaPath, what's one maybe unique or creative comp plan or comp strategy, either like that you've seen a business take or a team take that has produced really solid outcomes where maybe it wasn't any of those things that, I don't know, seemed obvious up front, but was just creative and unique? What are some of the things that you've seen work there?
Yeah, so there's a couple that come to mind immediately. I think the first one that what I really, really appreciated was we were working with a customer who was really focused on driving expansion within certain industries and driving, just more like name recognition for their business within certain vertical industries that they were trying to like tap into. And they rewarded their customer success and account management teams for driving referral customers from their existing customer base almost as much as like a new business customer rate that a new business team member would get. And so what I appreciated about that was it was arming the customer success team member to go to a customer that was in a certain vertical and motivating them to tell them, hey, look, it seems like you in the automotive industry are really happy with our software. We're making a push as a business to move more into this industry. I am getting rewarded. The CSM would tell the industry person or the customer, I'm getting rewarded if we're able to make more of a push here. Basically, it was like a split the pot sort of situation, which like actually worked out quite well. Hey, can I share this money with you, basically, if we can work together to find some people that you know? And so there's like an unexpected and fun like camaraderie component between the CS team member and the customer to like basically refer new customers to the business. And so what I liked about it was, yeah, people have referral programs all the time. Hey, I'll pay you as a customer X amount of money if you're willing to bring on new customers for us. But it was arming like the revenue team within the organization to like kind of bundle and pair with the customer and then work together to drive that expansion led to some really great outcomes in some particular industries, especially those like familial style industries.
Yeah, I like that too. It reminds me of actually, I was at our local Mexican restaurant last week, and at the end, when our waiter gave us the bill, he was like, "Hey, if you could also leave a Google review and just mention that you were happy with your service and mention my name. My name is Julio in the review, because we're running a contest so that whatever waiter or waitress gets the most reviews over the course of this time frame will win, like he said, either like a trip or like a gift card, something like." And so that was great because he did literally nothing but just ask for help. He did a good job with service like normal. But he told me about the contest that he was running, right? So the business is incentivized because they're able to get more Google reviews, which is great for them. The waiter and waitress is incentivized because they get a trip. And now I feel like I'm part of this like contest, right? I'm rooting for Julio.
You're gonna help Julio win.
Get him, I want to get him the contest. So yeah, like those things work, right? Yeah,
and I think it's also, I think we love our work and we love what we do. You're gainfully employed. You're not charitably employed, right? There's a financial component to why you do the work that you do. And so to just like be transparent and accept that and be like, hey, look, I'm trying to motivate you to do something. And to tell the team member, right? Like at that restaurant example, if I own that restaurant, I'm telling each member of my staff, hey, look, we have to up our Google reviews. Like we have to in order to remain competitive in this market. You could say the same thing for G2 reviews and other reviews in B2B software if you want to run the same parallel. But hey, we have to drive like higher volume of reviews from truly happy customers. And that leads to this for the business. It leads to more new customer volume in both examples. So I'm going to motivate you to do that and align everybody to that same shared outcome. And that's the ultimate goal. And that's why I appreciate teams that they don't try to be too cute with it. They're just saying, hey, look, this is what the business needs. I'm willing to pay you more. And you're motivated and I'm motivated and we're all on the same page.
Yeah. So I have two more questions for you before I let you go. The first one is called RevOps and comp related. The second one is not. So first question, what is just two things. What's the most common mistake that you see people make when it comes to comp plans? And then what's the one best practice that you'd recommend and want to make sure that everyone out there has incorporated in their comp plans today?
The most common mistake is that teams don't write that sentence, which is what I'm trying to get a comp plan to get you to do, and walk through that with the team. So if I'm rolling out a new comp plan, I'm constantly, and this happens pretty rare. People do this pretty rarely, which is always a thing that I try to advise on is, hey, look, this is your comp plan. I'm trying to motivate you to close more self-set multi-year deals, let's say. And I'm going to pay you more money for those because if they're self-set, then we didn't have to spend marketing dollars on them, let's say. And if they're multi-year, that leads to better net revenue retention for the business down the line because the customer has more time to get up and running and be successful in the product. And like that sentence is so important, but it's so often missed in a comp plan rollout where I just send you a screenshot of all your different rates. And what I'm trying to do is drive you as a person to deliver some sort of outcome. So I should just tell you what that outcome is.
Yeah.
And best practice, I would say, was the second part you asked, was or is really to be as transparent as humanly possible with your team on the motivations and what you're thinking about with compensation plan design. Ask your team members, hey, what do you like and not like about your comp plan? What changes would you make if it were up to you? Yeah, I'm not going to make all those changes for you, right? I'm not going to pay you a 65% commission rate, but I'm going to try to make some changes and give you some wins. And then ask those questions about what would make you really excited and get everybody aligned. And I actually like comp plan rollouts even more organizationally wide. Hey, we're trying to improve our ASP. We have to triple it this year as we make a push into more of the enterprise space. Here's how we're going to achieve that. I'm going to drive my BDRs and marketing team to drive higher pipeline. I'm going to reward my sellers for closing more of these kind of white whale deals. I'm going to reward product and engineering for releasing features that serve that market. I'm going to reward recruiting for hiring people who have that expertise if they meet that milestone. So we're all like aligned in our ability and focus on driving a change in one cardinal metric.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times, again, like you said, just write it down, put it out there in the simplest form that you can. That allows you to make sure you're able to clearly communicate what you want to accomplish, but also then you can get feedback on that in real time, right? If you tell a rep or any team member, hey, the goal of this comp plan is to get you to do X, right? Like you said, increase our ASP. Like they'll tell you if they feel like it doesn't help them accomplish.
Oh, yeah.
But it also allows you to very clearly articulate the actions that the comp plan is, again, meant to drive, not the output of what will happen if you take certain actions, even though that is also true as well. But again, it's reframing it to be what we talked about before of this compensation plan is meant to incentivize you to do this, right? Not this will get you these results, even though that is also very true.
Yeah, and take the multi-year example. You're going to start seeing your reps not even quote single-year deals. Like they're just, if they know they're going to make more money for selling a 2 or 3 year deal and it's a meaningful amount of money, they're going to weigh that risk in their head about, okay, what's their win rate if they quote a 3-year deal? And then if you are paying them enough money for it, they're just going to not quote 1-year deals. And then the customer's going to have to come back and be like, oh, we can only sign 1-year contracts. Then the rep says, okay, we can maybe make that work, but here's the cost you have to pay. And so you're trying to shift these little things that this human is doing to drive them to make outcome changes.
Yeah, makes sense. And so we talked a lot about RevOps, compensation, right? Compensation in industries outside of SaaS and software, compensation outside of the sales team. Obviously, you're a RevOps professional. You work at a company that has super high quality compensation software product. But outside of RevOps, outside of software, outside of compensation, when Ryan Milligan shuts his computer for the day or logs off, what are you passionate about? What's one thing that folks can find you doing that gets you excited outside of all the work stuff that we just talked about?
Great question. I love spending time with my daughter. I have a 1.5-year-old, so we are constantly exploring suburban Philadelphia, aquarium, Police Touch Museum, the zoo, all that sort of stuff. And then on a kind of more nerdy passion, I'm a big crossword guy. So I've written a couple crosswords in the past, a couple times New York Times crosswords, and I love doing the crossword. And I'm getting into all sorts of broader word-based games, the Wordles, the Strands, those of that nature. My current fixation, I get into these like games I love to play. There's a guy I found on Instagram, this guy Austin Krantz, who tries to get you to place all these different countries' sports teams or international sports teams to get to the sum of the total of them being under 150 in the total ranking. At sports under 150, it's like my current passion project that I do a bunch every day. So but I'm a big guy. That's how to work for sure.
That's awesome. I guess the nerdiness then just extends from comp planning to your free time as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. That's awesome. All right, y'all. Well, from comp plans to aquariums to New York Times crossword puzzles, Ryan Milligan, VP RevOps from QuotaPath, does it all. Ryan, thank you very much for dropping some knowledge on all things compensation for us. It was fun chatting with you.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode, everybody.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.
Keep it RevOpsAF, y'all.